Good afternoon, everybody. We are just going to let the room calm down a little bit whilst people join the event. Lovely to see lots of faces today. Please do keep your microphones on mute throughout the event. And if you wish to have your cameras on, it's lovely to see you. It's nice to know who we are engaging with, but understand that might not be possible for some people. We will get started in a couple of seconds. Just let the lobby calm down a little bit while people enter the room. Right. Okay, I'm going to get started. That's okay. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Caring the Webinar with our colleagues from Worknest. Thank you for joining us for what's clearly going to be a very timely and important discussion on the CQC reset and what the new assessment framework is likely to mean for care providers. We've had a very strong level of interest in this session, which is not surprising. CQC's approach to assessment, inspection, rating remains one of the most important issues for care providers, registered managers and quality leads across adult social care. The CQC consultation process has now moved on. So the original Better Regulation, Better Care consultation closed at the end of last year, and a further consultation on the draft sector-specific assessment framework. Could I ask you to pop yourself on mute, please, if that's okay? That's great, thank you very much. CQC is now refining, piloting and testing the new approach. So today is not about responding to the consultation, it's about understanding the direction of travel and helping care providers prepare sensibly. So the main direction is clear. The CQC is moving away from the single assessment framework towards sector-specific assessment frameworks. And for adult social care, this means a more tailored framework, structured and supported questions that look much more like the close that we used to have, reintroducing rating characteristics and a move away from scoring towards professional judgment at a key question level. Now, it's important to stress that the underlying regulations have not changed. They remain the same, and providers still need to evidence safe, effective, caring, responsive and well-led care in all that they do. So what is changing is how the CQC organises the framework, describes what it's looking for and reaches the rating judgments. There's also a transition period. CQC is piloting and testing various new assessment methods between June and October, with the evaluation expected in November. And those pilots sit alongside existing inspections, not instead of them. And pilot judgments do not affect legal status or ratings. That means providers need to stay inspection ready under the current arrangements, while also understanding what is coming next, and that's the purpose of today. So today's session is intended to be practical. We are not going to spend too long going over the history and the backstory of the single assessment framework, because many of you will already be familiar with that and the challenges that we've had over the last couple of years with regulation. Instead, we want to focus on what appears to be changing, what providers should be thinking about now, and how they can prepare in a sensible and proportionate way. So we are delighted to be joined by Julie Walton, who is the head of Health and Social Care Compliance, and Robin Drury. I will struggle with the name, the Drury, because it's the R's, Head of Operations from Worknest Care for Quality. They're going to take us through the key changes, the practical implications, and the actions providers may want to consider now. So as usual, the session is being recorded. And please use the chat function for questions that you want to raise and put to Julie or Robin. Submit those questions and we'll pick them up in a session towards the end. I'll also drop my email address into the chat for anyone who would like to raise a question. It is a sensitive subject and I can ask that question anonymously on your behalf. We are going to attempt 3 polls during the session, so please look out for those popping up on your screen. And if they do pop up, please engage with them, because it will really help us to shape direction of how this session goes today. So Julie and Robin are going to talk for about 30-35 minutes, and then I will facilitate a Q&A. And for the avoidance of doubt, copies of the slides and the recording will be shared before the end of the week. So without further ado, I will ask Robin to share her screen, and I'm very pleased to hand over to Julie and Robin to take you through the steps today. Julie,
Thank you,
Robin,
Richard.
over to you.
Lovely. And can you see, has that popped up? Can we see? Just checking it all works.
Yes.
Got no technical issues.
Perfect.
Right. Lovely. Thank you.
Absolutely
Oh,
perfect.
good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. As Richard says, Julie and I are going to talk about the regulatory reset and what you guys need to know about the CQC's draft changes. So that's me, Robin Drury, and that's Julie Walton, Head of Social Care Compliance. So what we're going to cover today, we're just going to look at four main areas. So what the CQC reset actually means for care providers. What are the biggest changes proposed in the new assessment approach? And how are these changes going to affect your services? And then the practical steps that you can take to prepare with confidence. So just a little bit about us. At Worknest, we help care providers stay compliant. This is across many areas, so HR, employment law, health and safety, cyber resilience, and of course with CQC support and care compliance. We are a gold partner to Care England. We are specialists in the care sector. I've been going for many years, and we give real world CQC inspection insight, not just theory. And we do provide practical hands-on support before, during, and after inspection should you need it. And we're part of the CCAF framework also. So how can Worknest support you? So just a little bit on how we tend to use our model. We like to assess services. So looking at the service through the eyes of the regulator, this could be a mock inspection or a specific assessment. We identify gaps, risks and priorities, and we give clear reports and action plans from those. This can move on to then improving those services, addressing the gaps and building stronger foundations. This can be within care compliance itself, HR, employment law, health and safety, fire safety, or policies and procedures. And we can respond. So practical support where it matters to you. So this could be in response to an inspection, or you may have had some enforcement action, or you may have changes within your service and you need to implement some actions, actually getting those things done. And then sustainability. So building that long-term confidence and compliance across all your services, strengthening your governance and being confident that you're inspection ready. So we'll move on now to a quick poll before we start, which will help us shape what we're going to discuss today. So have you as providers, as managers, participated in any of the CQC consultations? So the Better Regulation, Better Care. Now, a poll should have appeared on your screen with four options. If you could please engage, that would be really great for us. So number one is you attended and you provided feedback on the consultations. You attended, but maybe you didn't engage or provide the feedback. Number three, you were aware of the consultations, but you didn't participate. Or number four, maybe you weren't at all aware of the changes that CQC were proposing or the consultations ongoing. So if you could, I'll do mine now as well, that popped up. So if you could address that, then we will have a look and see what it's looking like. Oh, lovely. Okay, so 45% of people were aware of the consultations and the suggested changes, but they didn't participate. Now, that is actually quite a high number, I would say, and then followed by another 29% were not aware of the changes at all. So that is really, really interesting. So only 25% of you knew anything about the consultations at all. So that is really, really interesting. Good. That leads us on to what we need to discuss next then, please. I'm going to hand you over to my colleague, Julie, who's just going to talk to you a little bit about the proposed changes and where we've come from.
Hi, and thank you for joining us today. I know Richard said that everybody should be familiar with what's been happening over the last couple of years, and I can't imagine anyone on this call today has not been impacted by how the CQC has acted and brought in different actions and systems and processes in place. So we're all pretty much on the same page, but just to revisit it a little bit so that we all start off with the same baseline understanding. And I won't spend very long on this because, as Richard says, you should pretty much feel familiar with it, particularly if you had certain experiences with the CQC. So pre-2023, it was assessment frameworks, and they were based on CLOIS, which, if you remember, were basically the 5 key questions and what's sat under those were those key lines of inquiry, which is another word for a question, really. And it's basically saying what should really be in place. And underneath that had sub-questions, which helped you understand what sort of things that was being expected. So, for instance, under SAFE, it would have safeguarding, and one of the sub-questions under that would be that staff had full training and there was a safeguarding lead, etc. So that was the model that was in place, and it did reflect adult social care, primary care, hospitals. What it didn't reflect was mental health, and that really was quite a gap, actually, which has now been addressed. So we'll look at that in a second. So 23-25. Now, they brought a strategy out in 22, CQC, and like any organisation, they have to continuously try to improve what they do. So they have all sorts of pressures on them. They've got to continuously improve. They are public money, so they have to show value for money. And even though they're self-funding, there's an awful lot of money goes into it. And they have to constantly adapt and change to new ways of working, because we're in quite a fast changing world where things are starting to be presented in lots of different ways. So there's an awful lot of things that go on the CQC have to pick up and understand and then try to transfer. And it's quite understandable that they needed to do some transformation. Unfortunately, it was a huge task in one go, and we all know that there was lots of problems with that. The introduction of that single assessment framework, which was generic across all different sectors, even though there are always some elements that is generic across certain ones, such as safeguarding, for instance. So they went to this single assessment framework, and they brought in the 34 key quality statements. And to be honest, that was really the straw that broke the camel's back, I think, as well as portal issues. So there was two reviews, one of which was from Penny Dash. Sorry,
Julie, I do apologise to interrupt you. Sorry, there's quite a few comments coming in that the sound isn't very clear. I wonder whether you could speak quite closely to the microphone. It's quite crackly as well. I don't know what that is, whether there's an issue with the microphone, but if you could maybe just try and maybe, I don't know, keep still or talk closer to the microphone. I don't know what's going to fix it. I apologise.
Personal, yes, if you don't mind. Yeah, I'll try. Is that any better?
It feels it for me, but I don't know what it's like for other people. Thank you.
No, that's all right. So just basically, we did start off before 23-25 with assessment frameworks reflecting 3 of the different sectors, not mental health, particularly as in mental health hospitals, etc. Moved to single assessment framework, no longer having Chloe's. We had quality statements. And from those quality statements, which, as we found, was very difficult to interpret. They had different interpretations. Some of them were duplications, etc. So, of course, that led to a review by Penny Dash, and followed up by one by Professor Sir Mike Richards, who looked at the effectiveness of the new regime and the new way of working. And Sir Mike Richards actually then looked in a more of a deeper dive review of the actual nitty-gritty part of it. So what has that led to? That's led to an executive board with lots of changes. We no longer had the same chief executive, no longer had the same chair, and we found that there was some new leadership taken the agenda forward, really, on how to solve these problems. Huge amounts of problems with the IT. Thank you, Robin. So very quickly, 23, it was based on that continuous assessment model. Now, what they said was that they would be assessing people throughout the year with the information that comes across their desk, basically, and what they hold. And that can be anything from notifications through to incident reports, etc. So they do have a range, depending on what sector you work in, they do have quite a range of information. And they also then can contact you and ask you individually as a provider to actually send them some more information. And that's nothing new anyway, because if you think about your PIRs, you were sending information anyway. So that kind of system was extended to be part of, if we can assess you remotely over the year, we may not need to necessarily do a visit. So it was around getting greater flexibility. It was hoping to drive consistency across the sectors, because of course they thought one single framework saying the same would actually mean consistency across the sectors. And better use of technology. Unfortunately, as we all found out, depending on what sort of role we have in supporting service users and patients out there, we all found that it was too complex. The wording of the quality statements were very difficult to interpret. There was a lot of duplication. It didn't really help us with size and complexity of functions in services. So if you've got multiple functions, so if you're a hospital, for instance, or a care home that had quite a diverse range of services they put on, you might be a mix of residential, you might have some domiciliary care supported living as well within your organisation. So there's lots of complexities in some organisation. As I said, 34, Cripes 34 was a lot of quality statements, and there was insufficient emphasis on outcomes. Now, outcomes is an interesting one because it was the health service have been very familiar with outcomes in their assessments, because in the health service they have to report on lots of things which include outcomes. So they are quite familiar with have that information, and CQC, or the regulator, is very familiar with seeing information about clinical audit outcomes, morbidity, mortality, all sorts of surveillance stuff that comes out that enables them to produce outcome information. And then, of course, there's the Royal Colleges as well. So it's much easier for healthcare to provide those, but it's quite a new concept in some social services, is how do you then show outcomes in our sector, basically. Even though it's a really good question, it's a really important aspect. So there was also insufficient knowledge of inspectors, and of course they kept recruiting people hoping to help resolve some of the problems of getting assessments, backlogs, etc. But obviously it takes time to train people, and it takes time for experience to come on, particularly when everything around you is changing. So they really set themselves up a huge unmanageable task, basically. Thank you, Robin. Right, so why are these changes positive for providers? And I believe it is positive, and I'm quite happy to be shot down, but it is positive. And because, number one, it's been brought out of consultation and also learning. So the CQC have had a lot to learn, and they've had to have a lot of criticism that they've taken on board, and they've used it as part of deciding how to move forward. So they've made a lot of changes internally, and they've come back to the fact that actually, it was an idea of its time. It was meant to work smarter. It was meant to make things easier. It didn't. So no, let's go back. And one of the things that we found, and some of us on the call will have experienced this, is actually using the portal, for instance, was a nightmare, particularly if you're trying to apply for registration. And so their technology let them down as well. So all of these things have now been, after 2 reviews, been made very clear to the regulator where they fell down, where the problems were, and they've come forward. Sorry, Richard, I need to get closer.
No, it's not you, it's someone else. Someone's microphone's not turned off. Don't worry, that's fine.
Oh, I do apologise, being so close to the screen.
It's very poor sound quality, though, I'm afraid, Julie. It's very, very poor sound quality. So I do apologise.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we're starting off with a different approach from the regulator than previously. Although I have to say, going back when the original 5 key questions were were first created, there had been a huge amount of consultation then, and we're talking 2012, 2013 when that happened, so it's a good while ago. So they have, they're setting out clearer expectations, which, let's face it, we all need. As providers, we need to understand what it is that CQC is expecting we should be doing, what is the standard we're supposed to be meeting. As a CQC inspector, they need to know, what does good look like, what is it that we're actually expected to be doing, what does it cover, to make sure that we are consistent. And I know consistency is a big worry for some people. They're much fairer, more consistent ratings is what they're saying this next methodology will be. Transparent. They believe that the reports will be much more evidential, but it's going to be based on professional judgment, and I'll say something about that in a second. And of course, we will still keep the ratings. The reason I said just paused a little bit on professional judgment, because I know some people really liked the scoring and the percentages. And that's been replaced by professional judgment. But if you think about it, it was always professional judgment before the scoring came out. And so what we'll have to see is if once it's been started to be embedded, whether there is any further improvement they might not want to think about. But if you think about the scoring itself, again, that was also the inspector's professional judgment on deciding the value of a set of evidence and the impact against the quality statement. So I think we need to reserve judgment on that one. What I would say to you is, and I would have said this right at the beginning, is please get involved in consultations. If you get the chance, the CQC are very much wanting to work with providers, and so you are the experts at what you do. Please get involved in those. And if you haven't kept up to date with what's happening, and you're very busy, so that's perfectly understandable, please sign up for those update emails, because it will help you keep up to date. The system they're bringing in is more meaningful, and it's about being what's important to the people who use those services. What is their experience of the people that's actually at the end of that care? And they're looking to future-proof the overall methodology over time. Thank you, Robin.
Lovely, thanks, Julie. And yeah, I can apologise about the sound. That was not the sound we had earlier when we did our testing, so it sounds a bit like there might be a bit of a microphone issue. So I'm sorry about that. It's just one of those technical things when you do these. So let's do a quick poll. But there was some kind person in the chat that did say that if you press Alt, Shift, and C, you can get subtitles up as well. So if you are somebody that's suffering with the sound a little bit, that might help. Anyway, quick poll. So what do you think will be the biggest challenge under the new CQC framework? So those of you that do know what's coming and what framework is proposed, what do you think the biggest challenge will be? And maybe if you don't know, actually, and just knowing that there is a change coming, what do you think will pose the biggest challenge for you as a provider, or ops manager, ops director, manager, whatever your role is? Is it understanding what good looks like, evidencing outcomes clearly, preparing your staff and your managers and all again for this next change, or strengthening and realigning all your governance systems against the new framework? Lovely. So let's have a look and see what people are saying. Wow, lovely. So 50% of people are saying that the biggest challenge they think is actually evidencing the outcomes clearly against, I assume, those new key questions. Julie's nodding. She's like, you're in agreement here, because again, it's a whole new set of questions to be presenting your evidence again, isn't it? It's just gone up to 52%. Lovely. Thank you for participating in that. So Julie, with regards to that and the new changes, shall we go on?
Yes. I want to take you all back just one little step, really, because ultimately, and this is really important to think about, and I'll get closer to the screen, I'm sorry, I keep drifting away. This is really important because if you're a provider or a registered manager, or even if you're a senior director that oversees services, whatever your role is in making sure that whether it's a care home, supported living, or whether it's a GP practice, if you're in charge of making sure things are compliant with the regulator, then what you're really doing is making sure that you're meeting the regulations. Because the way that it works is you have the Health and Social Care Act, which is the overarching act. That's the Health and Social Care Act 2008. That is very clear about the functions, the powers, etc., of what the regulator has to do, the CQC has to do, and also, you know, how they go about things, which is then further brought down under the 2 sets of regulations. There's only 2 sets of regulations under the Health and Social Care Act. And those are the legislation, those are the things that you are, as a provider, showing compliance. Now, how CQC goes about assessing you, whether it's for a registration variation application or whether it's actually assessing your service for inspection, they have to create some methodology that's discretional. What they have to do, like yourselves, they have to make sure that they comply with the legislation and the regulations, because there are duties and things that they themselves have to do, such as the consultation that they've been doing. Producing guidance is another one. There's lots of things that they are expected to do as the regulator that's within the Act, and then explain a bit more in those regulations. And all of you should be familiar with the regulated activities which brought in the fundamental standards. So if you're not, please go. I recommend highly that you go and look at the regulations. Don't do it all in one go, and they're very easy to read. But your job is to meet those regulations, and the CQC have the discretion on how they assess your compliance with those regulations. That's why you see on your inspection reports that if you have an action you have to do, it's been called all sorts from requirement notices to improvement notices to now action planning. So it doesn't matter really what it's called, it's something you have to do. And you will see that against them, they will say there was a breach of regulation, not breach of quality standard statements, not breach of GLOEs, breach of regulation. So ultimately, you start off with that your responsibility is those regulations, and they're not rocket science. They're very easy to read, and they will make absolute sense to you, because it's things like privacy, dignity, safeguarding, care and safe care and treatment, such as medicines and infection, etc. So it really isn't that complicated. So the way that going forward, obviously they can't do anything about the regulations. There is the power to add to those, so please keep an eye on that, but I'm not aware of any going to happen soon. They've kept the 5 key questions, so there's no change. Safe, effective, caring, responsive and well led, same as before, so you don't have to learn something new. They are keeping the statements that came out with the 23 changes, because it articulated a great deal on how people perceive what they expect from you as a service. I expect to be kept safe, I expect, etc. And they were made very much in consultation with different associations and views coming through. So that they really did a big piece of work to make sure that those statements reflected what people would want to see, regardless of what sort of service was being offered. And they've kept the aggregated ratings, which is more around, if a key question, if it's rated for hospitals, for instance, do they have an overall rating of the trust, etc. So going back to pre-2023, so if you remember that slide previously, we had the pre-23, which showed you the 5 key questions, the CLOEs. It had those 3 sector assessment frameworks: adult social care, primary care, hospitals. We're going back to that scenario because it was found actually that what is meaningful for a care home is not meaningful necessarily for a GP practice, because they are dealing with so many different aspects to people's treatment, care and experience. So it doesn't make sense that you have the same thing for everybody, but there are things in common. Just like I said previously, infection control is in common. You know, medication, if you're doing medication, that's in common. Safeguarding in common, staff training, etc., recruitment in common. So there is an awful lot of things that you have in common, but they will be slightly different expectations of them depending on what sector you work in. So what's staying is regulations, 5 key questions, I statements, and those aggregated ratings. So what they're bringing back is those 3 assessment frameworks again, but this time they've addressed that huge gap from previous methodologies, and that is the mental health sector. So that's a really big positive move for the regulator to do that. We're keeping Chloe's. So where we were before, when it was Chloe's under the pre-23, we're going to have Chloe's again. What does that mean? It means you've got your 5 key questions, say in SAFE. Under that, they're broken down into those key lines of inquiry. As I said, that gave an example of safeguarding. And then again, under that, there's going to be some further supportive questions to help break it down even further. The rating characteristics, which was a big feature pre-23, and they were incredibly useful because you were able to look at your service, and you could even rate yourself without an inspector walking through the door. You can look at the ratings and say, right, I'm just going to concentrate on good. And can we evidence that we are this? Can we evidence that we do that? And so having ratings is like having the criteria in an exam in a way. It tells you what you need to be doing to be good. And it also, because of the outstanding element, it enables you to start considering, do we fit some examples of outstanding, or you know, is this what we need to look at if we'd like to get there one day? So what's going? As I said earlier, the scoring's going. It's to professional judgment. Body statements are going. And so one of the things I think is really important and why it's positive is that, one, it's being done in consultation with general public and lots of other stakeholders. And the aim is to address the concerns that came out following the 23 strategy and the changes that were brought in there. And thirdly, it's about being simple. It's about being easy to read, easy to understand, which can only be helpful to everybody. Thank you, Robin. So, regulations. I've said to you, remember, you're always responsible for those regulations. And the 4 quality indicators is the regulations, the 5 key questions, the Chloe's, and the I statements. So you have the tools with those things when you see them, and they have published for the consultation the assessment frameworks for your sector, so you can work your way through them and have a look. You will be familiar with quite a few of the things that's in there because, you know, mandatory training is mandatory training, isn't it? And so there's a lot of things that should be very familiar with you. It's just presented in a slightly different way. So what we have also heard from CQC is that they're also going to roll out another process. Now, remember, they've got 9,000 reports they're aiming to be published by September, and they've had a backlog on lots of inspections, backlog on registrations, so they're dealing with this backlog all the time. And one of the things that they are shortly rolling out, I have read, and it's part of one of the updates, is that they're going to look at making it easy to assess a service but there are caveats to that. So they're going to look at, and they will just do a more, not light touch, but it's going to be a much more focused and less comprehensive in the inspection. But there are reasons they've got to sort of tick lots of boxes to be able to do that. So you've got to be currently rated as good in all 5 key questions. You need to have a registered manager in post. There needs to be information that's crossed CQC's desk that doesn't give any indication of risk or problems. Not subject to ongoing enforcement, and this new lighter look at people's services is really going to be focusing on people's experience outcomes, that word again, and they're going to use observation and targeted documents. So that is one of the methods they seem to be introducing that's going to try and expedite some of these long-awaited inspections. So can you move on, please, Robin? Right. So this is just the proposed framework in practice. Let me just use one example for you. And it's very much about inspectors. They're going to identify information that they look at, evidence that they see, respond to it, make a decision, outcomes. Now, as a provider, you have to think about CQC, apart from being the gatekeeper for safety and high quality in the country, they also see themselves very much as part and parcel of the improvement agenda. And they do that by themed reports, they do that by holding the mirror up at services and letting them know where things need to be improved. And they also share good practice and national reports. So they very much want to see that if you're finding information in your audits or complaints or an incident, wherever it comes from, that you are actually putting actions in place that will change practice and it's sustained. So learning is very, very key to part and parcel of whether you're doing an audit. So if safeguarding, for instance, identify the concern, take appropriate action, you can show that from your safeguarding reporting. Your documentation is really clear, and it's very clear what decisions were made and when, and that learning, that evidence of embedded practice and continuous aim to keep on improving. So please follow up on your actions to make sure that they have embedded, is a nice example of the way CQC would look at a whole range of things that you're doing, from training right the way through to your dealing with investigation outcomes. Thank you, Robin.
Lovely. Thank you, Julie. Well, I think we're overrunning slightly, so I'm going to do a very quick poll. So how likely do you all think that the well-led key question will negatively impact your next CQC rating? So all of those governance areas, feedback, staffing, those well-led elements, do you think that could negatively impact anything? Maybe very likely, somewhat likely, unlikely, or unsure? If we could have a quick vote, that'd be great. Thank you. A second. People are still voting. Lovely. Okay, so
as Robin said, so we might just need to just be conscious of that to get some time for questions.
Perfect. Yeah. Lovely. So it's quite split actually. 34% say somewhat likely and 34% say unlikely. So many people are confident in this area, but we do have 25% of people that are quite unsure about this. Lovely. So the next bit is just 5 actions we can take now, Julie, for the providers can take now.
Yeah. So we've just put some actions here that you might want to think about taking away with you. Audit where your current evidence aligns with quality statements, but I would also add to that to get familiar with the regulations as well. But look at those ratings. Those ratings are really good help towards looking at where would we rate ourselves. Start mapping evidence against likely Chloe themes that's coming. and review your governance and oversight arrangements. Do you know where all your sources of information are coming through? Are you confident it's telling you accurately in a timely way? Do things get escalated if it's a risk? If not, you need to rethink about some of your governance reporting systems, and prepare your managers for a more focused framework, and so that they get the support and resources that they need to be able to feel much more comfortable when dealing with the regulator. That's Robin.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Lovely. Thank you, Julie. Lovely. So how can Worknest support you in your organisation? So we can do those assessments for you. We have realistic mock inspections that align with the current framework, whatever that should be at the time. But we're looking for gaps in compliance against the regulations at the end of the day, so that you can find where you need to improve. Again, same with your policy reviews and updates. We can help you ensure your policies and procedures and your documentation remain aligned with the current CQC inspections. And we can provide expert guidance on these changes for yourselves, your managers, any training, mentoring. We provide ongoing compliance and support, and we provide practical support for your leaders and managers in-house, essentially. We are your one-stop shop, really, for your compliance needs. We do any CQC support, specialist HR, health and safety, fire safety, cyber resilience, and data protection. Lovely. So we will now go on to, we've got some time for questions and answers, Richard, I believe. So if you're happy, we'll pass that back to you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, and the questions are starting to flow in now. It was really helpful. Really important point for providers is that it's just not just a technical change around terminology. The CQC has really now set out a new direction that includes very sector-specific framework supporting questions, rating characteristics, and removal of scoring, and rating made by question level. So, you know, I believe there were also some changes to the I statement language. They're not exactly the same, but I can't quite recall that. It's helpful to see what stays, what returns, and sort of what goes made so clear in your presentation. So thank you for that. That's incredibly helpful. I think for providers, a key question is really what this means in practice and how they prepare and start to move forward. So we've got lots of questions come in. I think Zinat summed up what a lot of care providers say is that they keep changing things at the CQC, and it's very difficult to keep up. And as when we were preparing for this session, I sort of said, don't spend too long on the history, because actually we all know that. Well, of course, the first thing that people said is a lot of them didn't know the history. So really good point that you covered that, because I'm working on the assumption that everyone's been taken on this journey because we've been immersed in it, but of course not everyone has. Now we've got some great questions come through. I'll try and group them as best as I can. The first one really is about, I think one of the biggest challenges will be the inspector interpretation of what it all means and what the changes are, as that determines the kind of end report. And there's another couple of questions that came in making the same sort of point, is that we can evidence all day long, but if the inspector doesn't like the way it's evidenced, then it means nothing. So how do we evidence so the inspectors can use their judgment appropriately? And also the last bit of that question is really around, until the new changes are coming into place, care homes can still use that evidence work that was completed as CQC evidence under the quality statement documents currently. So pulling all that to kind of gather around the professional judgment, what's changed, what's not changing, how best are providers to focus their attention on getting across to the inspectors information in the most helpful format?
Right, that's probably quite a pivotal and huge question, really, in one go. But I personally would say that it hasn't, regardless of the methodology, what hasn't changed is the regulations. And the evidence that you're using against quality standards, the quality statements, quality statements were quite difficult to, some were okay, but some of them were really quite vague or duplicated stuff. And really what I would say to you is look at the sector framework that they've published, and you will see by the language and what's being asked that it's the usual sort of things that you would expect just running a business. So recruitment and selection policies and processes. So for instance, are your files, do you have a checklist? If I came in as an inspector and looked at your latest recruits, would I see that the process was very clear, and the expectations of what should be in a staff file are there. Those are things that you can easily do, and it won't matter whether it's a quality statement or whether it's a Chloe. That is good evidence around recruitment and selection, and part and parcel of the SAFE will be including, and this won't change because it is what it is about the safe recruitment of staff. So a lot of things that you've got in place now that were there for quality statements will be either the same or very similar to what you had before, because it's the same with safeguarding and medication. So, you know, it was medicine optimization under quality statements, but if you break them down, you will see it's the same sorts of things that you're used to doing on a day-to-day basis: staff training, record keeping, risk assessing, conditions being assessed, storage, etc. And so these things, they may be worded slightly differently, but ultimately it's that they're sitting in the regulations, which are the fundamental standards. And so as long as you've got evidence that can show that, so good records, clear, say, Mars charts or electronic records in medicines, training records, these are the things that you should have anyway. And these are good evidence. And with regard to professional judgment, the CQC have said, haven't they, that they are bringing some tools out to part and parcel of training and development of their inspectors. There'll be inspectors out there who are already very, very experienced, who will be able to move to this new methodology fairly easily, because, as I say, the regulations haven't changed, and the evidence that sits under a regulation is the same sort of evidence that you would normally have regarding most things that you have. So, you know, ensuring that care records are up to date and that risk assessments are up to date, and changes in conditions, and staff have good communication on knowing how to look after a person, particularly if agency come in, then, you know, that's still really good evidence. So I wouldn't worry too much about professional judgment and evidence. I know it's always been said for many years that there is inconsistency, and I don't doubt people who have experienced some of that. But on the whole, we don't tend to get that amount of inconsistency nationally. And there is also bringing in, according to their updates, a quality assurance process. Now, they've always had a quality assurance process, but it looks like they're strengthening their quality assurance processes, as well as these tools they say they're going to bring in to help inspectors with their consistency and professional judgment.
Thank you for that. And I mean, that correlates with a couple of the comments made around inspectors are inspecting how they want each of the individual thing to be done differently. And there's a vast difference between inspectors in certain individuals' experience on the call. And we do hear quite a lot about the inconsistency between inspectors. And we are developing tools to actually plot that. And so we'll be able to compare it region by region, local authority by local authority. You may not be able to answer this next question, but I can... I'll ask you. I have an answer for you if it's not something you're aware of at the moment. But has the CQC outlined how the inspectors will be matched with the sectors and or the size of the service that's being inspected, and are they bringing back the relationship owner? Do you have any thoughts on that? I do have a comment.
Yeah, that's two very good questions. They did say that they were looking to reinstitute the relationship holder. But they, as far as I can see, I can't see that they've got much further than that at the moment. So I think we're still going to be waiting a while to see whether that happens. Personally, I think it is a really valuable relationship. So, and what was the first part of the question? Sorry, I got so into thinking about that one.
It was the same. It was the same question you've answered, and I'll just say, we have been engaging with the CQC on this, but in practical terms, each location will have a named portfolio holder, an adult social care inspector, and their role will be to act as a consistent point of contact for that location, and to build and maintain oversight on quality, safety, risk over time. and that includes reviewing intelligence, understanding the service context, and ensuring that emerging concerns are identified and responded appropriately. And those portfolio holders will be adult social care inspectors, so they bring a baseline level of knowledge and experience across the whole of adult social care. However, at this stage, they are not creating portfolios aligned to specific service types. Inspectors will hold mixed portfolios across all services in their locality. So it's a move towards that, but it's not quite going to be there yet. We don't know what the timeline is.
No, and you have to remember that there's still a lot of staff there who are pre the change, were already in hospital sector, already in adult social care sector, primary care sector. So I would assume, and it would be intelligent for those people to move back into those sectors which they have the expertise for. So you're not going to be starting from square one. They will have already people who have that expertise and experience in those sectors. So apart from those who particularly want to transfer out of that sector, I can't see that they'll be starting with nobody learning it all. I think you will have quite a lot of experience that's already present in those sectors already.
A couple more questions. We've got quite a few still to get through, so we'll just try and be quite targeted if that's okay in the response. How will the CQC assess providers where desired outcomes cannot realistically be achieved because of funding levels or commission support packages which are insufficient to meet the assessed needs? That's a very good question.
Yeah, I sympathise with that question. I know, funding, particularly for the care sector, is something that is a real worry, but obviously we can't answer a question about government policy. But what I will say to you is that where there are difficulties, number one, be very articulate about the difficulties when you speak with your inspector, so it's very clear. But number two, they will be very interested in how you're dealing with any risk. So if there are particular fallout issues from that, then also think about how we are going to be contingency planning and how we're dealing with particular risk, because CQC will be very keen to understand about how risk is managed.
Brilliant. And I think from our perspective, I think one of the points that we always talk about at Care England is that if you believe that you can't meet the needs of a person, then you shouldn't be taking them on for the package that's being offered. We know a lot of providers do underprice because they try to secure occupancy, because there's a huge amount of pressure on occupancy. It's very different if someone's needs change when they're placed with you, but I think the CQC will look at why have you taken a resident if you can't meet their needs. That's definitely a consideration. Has the CQC outlined how inspectors will be matched with the sector or the size? I think we've kind of covered that one. Are the Chloes remaining the same as before? That's an interesting question.
It is very interesting. I mean, not exactly. The framework's there, the draft framework, so you can easily just go onto CQC website and get a hold of whichever sector you're working in, and you can look at those. They're very similar. There's a lot less. It's certainly not on the same as the 34 party statements. It's much clearer what's expected of you, and again, use the ratings definitions to help you with that one. But no, they're generally cover the same sort of things. As I said, there's certain things that is very difficult to do differently, like safeguarding and medication, etc. But there is a real emphasis on people's experience and an emphasis on human rights and equality, quite rightly. So I would look at those as well, particularly on how you would evidence people's equality, equity of experience. That's really quite up there in those Chloes.
And I think another question that's come up, and it comes up quite a lot, is AI. AI is very topical at the moment, and for anyone who listens to the Digital Care Hub, we should have our klaxon going off at that point. But the CQC have talked about AI. They've put some statements out about AI. Providers are using AI. What are your thoughts, and what caution are you advising, and what do you advise generally about AI to support the sector?
Yeah, I mean, AI is an incredibly useful tool. There's no point denying that, and you can see why people would use it. The cautionary tale, I think everybody would be aware of. If you're going to use AI, be very, very clear what you're going to put into it as you expect to get out of it, and don't take for granted that it's just told you everything you need to know. You need to have an experienced eye looking at what's produced to see that it does make sense, so you're not ending up producing something that's going to cause you problems later on. And get yourself sorted out with an AI policy. If you're going to be using AI for certain things, make sure you've got an AI policy for your organisation.
Just to add to that as well, Julie, we're seeing a lot of our mock inspections where services are using AI to populate their care plans, that they're not necessarily person-centred. AI tends to embellish a lot. So you might be doing a person's care plan and it's adding extra information that's not accurate. So you really do need that person that's experienced, if you're going to use AI, that is going to go through it with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that it is person-centred to that person, to their needs and their requirements, and their, you know, goals, aspirations, likes, dislikes, because if you let it run loose, sometimes it's not quite what you want it to be. It's a tool for quickness and effectiveness sometimes, but it's not always accurate.
And please do some courses on AI, because you can ask the AI to not embellish and not expand on your answers and to not make things
but people
up.
don't know that, Richard.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So please do those courses, learn how to use AI properly, because it's a great tool, but it can also cause a lot of problems if not managed correctly. I'm going to ask you 3 rapid fire questions, if that's okay, because I'm conscious of time. The CQC have said it will remove scoring and make rating judgments directly at key question level. What are the practical implications of that for care providers? A very difficult one to answer quickly, but just initial thoughts.
Yeah, no, I can understand the question, and we could take days to talk it out. Very, very simply, look at what you've got, look at how you can evidence it. Is it clear? Is it articulated clearly? So if it's a risk assessment, does it cover everything it should cover, and anybody who walks in can understand it? What about outcomes to any of these things? Do they clearly articulate those things? Do you follow them up? So it's really about being extremely clear about what it is, whether it's a care record, a risk assessment, a mandatory training schedule. It's about clarity. So the clearer you are, the less questions you should get.
Fabulous. And question 2 for the rapid fire. What should providers do with their current evidence audits and quality assurance systems while the framework is changing?
I would just, stay with what you've got, but be open-minded to improving upon it. And so use what information's coming out with those assessment frameworks and those CLOEs. And of course, you can always get expert advice to look at them, etc. Or like, the work we do is come out and do fresh eyes. But use them, but then assess them yourselves for clarity and if they give you what you need to do. But use those CLOEs, and of course, you've got to meet those regulations. But the rating definitions gives you a lot of information. So it's about confidence in what you've got, isn't it, really?
And the very last one I'm going to ask you is what should registered managers be doing now with their teams so staff understand the direction of travel? What are the 1 or 2 things that they do now and have the biggest impact to get ready for what's about to happen?
Yeah, you need to carry your staff right from the beginning. Staff need to understand all about, what CQC are there for. They're not there to particularly criticise them. They're there to make sure mums and dads and neighbours are safe in their care, and that, carry them forward right from the beginning, and also ask their opinion about the services and where things aren't as good as, and ideas for improvement as well, and if things work well. So obviously you're going to need to, you should do anyway, be having a proper oversight of all your resources, but staff are a great resource. And if they understand what's happening and you involve them and carry them forward, create champions for certain things, it helps them feel valued. So that's what I would, right at the beginning, carry your staff right from the beginning, so they're not feel as though they're done to, and there's no blame, there's no, I hope I don't say the wrong thing sort of feeling.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you, Julie and Robin, for such a helpful practical session. I think one of the key messages I take away from today is that while the language and the structure of the CQC assessment framework is changing, the underlying expectation on providers remains the same. The regulations have not changed. Providers still need to evidence safe, effective, caring, responsive and well-led care, but they also need to understand how that evidence may be organised, reorganised or interpreted slightly differently under the revised approach. So it's also, very clear that providers should not wait passively for the final framework. There are sensible steps that can be taken now to make sure evidence is current, and understanding where the risks and improvements sit. So supporting managers to explain quality clearly and keeping teams focused on regulation and the lived experience of people that draw on care and support is absolutely imperative and should be something that we've absolutely focused on in every way, shape and form, evidencing based on how it impacts those drawing on our care. Thank you to everyone who joined us today and for contributing questions and comments. We didn't get through them all, but if you do have any questions, we'll make sure we provide Robin and Julie's details so you can reach out to them directly. We will circulate the slides of the recording before the end of the week, and we wish you the very best for the rest of today. Thank you for joining. Stay in contact with us, and we look forward to working with you all very, very soon. Thank you. We will end the session there, and I will ask Julie and Robin if you wouldn't mind staying on for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Enjoy your afternoons.